Hey everyone, it's Miss Caroline here. Today I'm going to be going over your homework on the Fertile Crescent. Okay, so before we get into it, I just want to go over this map that you have as well as what the questions are. So I colored in this map just because it was a little bit confusing to me. I actually looked up a picture online to make sure I was doing it right. Because they had these white parts that were the same color as this other part. So it was hard to tell what was water and what was land. So the parts that I colored in blue are the water. So over here we have the Mediterranean Sea, which if you have global scholars from Spain, from Barcelona or Madrid, they might have talked about the Mediterranean Sea. So Spain would be over in this area, but it's cut off. So here's the Mediterranean Sea, and then we have the Nile River coming down, draining out from the bottom of the south of the Mediterranean Sea through Egypt. Here's the Nile River. And then over here, we have the Euphrates River on the bottom and the Tigris River on the top. So Tigris on top, then the Euphrates. All right, and then they drain into the Persian Gulf. And then the rest of the map is land. Well, I think that this white spot up here, this is a little bit of water, and this is water right here. But the rest of this gray is land. But the reason that I didn't color it in is because the Fertile Crescent is only the part in yellow that I colored in. So you know how sometimes you look out at the sky and the moon is a little sliver? It's called a crescent moon. So if you turn it to the sideways, you kind of see this crescent shape, a C shape. That's why it's called the Fertile Crescent. The shape is crescent, and fertile, the land here was really fertile, which means it was really, really good for farming. So we'll learn more about that once we get into it. So now that we've gone over the map, let's look at our questions. So it looks like first what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the blanks. So with this, all of the answers are right in here. It literally takes a sentence from here, puts it in here, and then just deletes out some of the letters. So if you're reading along, you can find all of these right in the story that we're going to read. All right. Then Miss Eggleston said we don't have to do number 1. Number 2 is what is the Fertile Crescent? So we'll definitely learn about that because the name of the passage is the Fertile Crescent. We don't have to do number 3. Number 4 says, why do you think people choose to settle in areas with abundant natural resources? Abundant means a lot. A lot of. So if you have an abundant amount of food, that means you have a lot of food. If you're playing Fortnite and you tell your partner that you have an abundant amount of mats to build with, then that means that you have a lot of them. All right? So why do you think people choose to settle in areas with abundant, a lot of, natural resources? So natural, meaning we get them from the earth, from nature. We don't need to make them. And resources are things that we can use to help us. Number 5, what are the natural boundaries of Mesopotamia? Why do we call the land Mesopotamia? Okay, so those are the questions we're going to be looking through. So let's begin. And remember, you're at home, follow along on yours as I point, okay? So the Fertile Crescent. Before they settled down in various parts of the world, humans lived as nomads for tens of thousands of years. Nomads are people who have no permanent home and travel in search of food and safety. This is one of our words from last time, a nomad. So they're just wandering around. They don't have a home. They were following the animals from place to place wherever they went. A typical nomadic group might include an extended family of about 10 adults and their children. They would temporarily camp in an area for a few weeks or months. The men hunting animals and the women gathering fruit, grains, seeds, and nuts. When the nomads exhausted the resources in that area, they moved on. So exhausted here doesn't mean tired. It means when they used them all up. So when they used up all of the resources in that area, they moved on. So maybe they hunted all the animals they could find. They gathered all the nuts and berries they could find. There was nothing left. Then they would move on. Civilization developed slowly in different parts of the world. People began to settle in areas with abundant, remember we said that means a lot of, natural resources. For thousands of years, people have been attracted to a part of the world archaeologists later called the Fertile Crescent. So let's look. Let's see if we can fill in any of the blanks yet. All right. I'm looking and it seems like it's talking about some rivers. So I don't think we've gotten to that yet. So let's keep reading. And we're looking for a sentence that starts out or has this in it. About 7,500 years ago, a group of people gave up their blank lifestyles to settle in the area between the blank and the blank rivers. So we're going to look for that sentence so we can fill in those blanks. Okay. The Fertile Crescent is a boomerang-shaped region that extends from the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. It is a rich food-growing area in a part of the world where most of the land is too dry for farming. So most of this other gray land that we have here, it's too dry. You can't farm there. You can't plant things there. They won't be able to grow. But in this yellow part, which they call it a boomerang shape or a crescent shape, and it starts from never eat soggy worms, starts from here, but it also includes this little part, eastern side, and it goes down to the Persian Gulf. Okay. Some of the best farmland of the Fertile Crescent is on a narrow strip of land between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Okay. So here's the Euphrates River, here's the Tigris River, and in between here is Mesopotamia. So in between that land is some of the best farmland of the Fertile Crescent, between this little area right here between those two rivers. The two rivers travel in the same direction for thousands of miles before they combine to drain into the Persian Gulf, right down here. So they're separate, going separately, and then they come together into the Persian Gulf. The Greeks called this area Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers. Very little rain falls in Mesopotamia, but water and nutrients from the river soak into the land, creating an environment filled with plants and the animals that feed on the vegetation. So even though it doesn't rain a lot, this strip of land is right between these two rivers. So the nutrients from the water soaks into the soil in the middle here so that they can farm. And so not only does it bring a lot of plants, but then it brings animals that will eat those plants, or vegetation, as they call it. Okay. Many different civilizations flourished in this small region. The Sumerians slowly developed one of the first civilizations in the southeastern section of Mesopotamia as early as 7,500 years ago. Hello, Indy. All right, so the southeastern section, so southeast, so in this bottom section of Mesopotamia. All right, so it says 7,500 years ago. Okay, so let's see. So about 7,500 years ago, a group of people gave up their blank lifestyles. Well, what did we say? How did they live before they started to settle in these areas? They were nomads, and they had a nomadic lifestyle. Okay? So, nomadic. They gave up their nomadic lifestyle to live between these two rivers, the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. And those are our first blanks. I'm going to use red today. The leaves are changing red. All right, so we have the N. We need the O. Nomadic lifestyles to settle in the areas between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Euphrates rivers. The Greeks later called this land blank, which means blank. Okay, so what was this area called in between the two rivers? Okay, sorry guys. It's going to do that again in a second if you can hear that. It's like a Halloween decoration from my neighbors. The first time we heard that, we freaked out and we were looking all around the house, but we think it's a Halloween decoration from our neighbors. All right, and that should be the last time it does it. It always happens at the same time every day. All right, so anyway, so this area between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Let's see, remember what it was called? The Greeks called this area Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers. All right, so here's our answer. And this same sentence is right in the question. So the Greeks called this area Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers. Those are the blanks. See how it's the same? The Greeks later called this land Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers. Mesopotamia is part of the blank blank, a blank-shaped region that extends from the blank shore of the blank sea to the blank Gulf. Okay, so remember, what is Mesopotamia part of? Mesopotamia is this little section within the bigger Fertile Crescent. Okay, so Mesopotamia is part of the Fertile Crescent. And what shape did they call it? So it was part of the Fertile Crescent. All right. And the Fertile Crescent is a boomerang-shaped region that extends from the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. That part is the second part of this blank. Fertile Crescent, a blank-shaped region that extends from the blank shore of the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. So now we know what those blanks are. The Fertile Crescent is a boomerang-shaped region that extends from the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. Mediterranean. Oops, and I missed these ones, sorry. So Fertile Crescent, it's a boomerang-shaped region that extends from the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. So this is what you should have so far. Next, what we're looking for. Several civilizations developed in Mesopotamia partly because the rivers provide the region with blank natural blank. All right. So let's see what we will put in there. Let's keep reading a little bit. All right. Many different civilizations flourished in this small region. The Sumerians slowly developed one of the first civilizations in the southeastern section of Mesopotamia as early as 7,500 years ago. The Sumerian civilization lasted more than 3,000 years. But in time, the Sumerians lost their influence. The Babylonians formed a centralized government under King Hammurabi. The Babylonian culture lasted from about 1770 BC to about 1595 BC. Or we can say 1770 BC to 1595 BC. Various other cultures dominated part or all of the Fertile Crescent, including Amorites, the Kassites, the Hittites, and the Assyrians. The land known as Mesopotamia was later controlled by the Persians, the Greeks under Alexander the Great, the Romans, and the Ottoman Turks. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates has been part of the modern nation of Iraq since 1932. Okay. So back up here, it was talking about all of the nutrients from the water that soak into the land. So what we can say about that is that it has a lot of natural resources. And what is that new word that we talk about? Abundant. And it actually says it also right here. People began to settle in areas with abundant natural resources. Abundant natural resources. So abundant and resources are our words there. Abundant natural resources. Okay? And then let's see who the first to settle near this area was. So here it says, the Sumerians slowly developed one of the first civilizations in the southeastern section of Mesopotamia as early as 7,500 years ago. So our blank is Sumerians and 7,500. Sumerians. Well, this says BC, so that's not the same as. So this technically isn't, so since this has BC here, it's not 7,500 BC, because that would be longer than 7,500 years ago. Because remember, we're in positive 2019. You can think of it like that in terms of positive and negative. This would be like negative. If this BC means negative. This isn't saying it was 7,500 BC. It was saying it was 7,500 years ago. So you have to subtract 7,500 from 2019, which is the year we're in. Okay, so that's like a little bit tricky. So if you subtract 7,500 from 2019, you get 5 you get 5481, 5,481, 5481 BC. That's like a trick question. I think it would be fine if you had put 7,500 years ago, but since it says BC, we want to be correct. So we have to do that math. So to find that, what I did was I did 2019, the year we're in, minus 7,500 because this happened 7,500 years ago. And when I do that, you get a negative number. So you get a negative number, I'm sorry. Negative, which means that negative means BC. Okay? Sorry about that. I didn't realize that when I first went through this. So this BC changes it. Okay? Later, Mesopotamian blank included the blank and the blank. Okay, so let's see. Who else lived in Mesopotamia? Okay, so we know one of them starts with a B and one of them starts with an A. So you see the Babylonians also lived there. Our marker's starting to go. And the Assyrians. And these are later Mesopotamian civilizations. So later Mesopotamian civilizations included the Babylonians, and the Assyrians. Mesopotamia was later controlled by the blank, and the blank. Mesopotamia was later controlled by the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. So Mesopotamia was later controlled by the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. Mesopotamia is now part of the blank nation of blank. So what is it part of now? It says that right at the end. Part of the modern nation of Iraq since 1932. So our blanks are Iraq and 1932. Actually, 1930, it doesn't ask for that. The other word is modern. Modern means like right now. Now it's part of Iraq. So Mesopotamia is now part of the modern nation of Iraq. Okay, so now our fill in the blanks are done. We got it. Now we're moving on to question number 2. What is the Fertile Crescent? So that's right here. The Fertile Crescent is a boomerang-shaped region that extends from the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. It is a rich food-growing area in a part of the world where most of the land is too dry for farming. Remember, when you do this, you do not have to write all of this stuff. But all this information is important. So what you should do is you should put it in your own words. All right? It's better to summarize it in your own words. It's less work for you, and it will help you remember it better. So it's like a win-win. So to restate for number 2, the Fertile Crescent is. And you're going to put your answer. Now we're going to jump down to number 4. Why do you think people choose to settle in areas with abundant a lot of natural resources. So to restate, I think people choose to settle in areas with abundant natural resources because, and you're going to put your answer. And think about it. Would you rather live in a place with a lot of resources, a lot of things that will help you, or a place where there isn't as much? And remember, back then, they didn't have the same kind of technology and transportation resources as we do. So they needed to rely on what their nature provided for them to live. So why would they want to live somewhere where there's a lot of water nearby, where the soil is good for farming? Why is that going to be important to them? And you can get some clues in this area. And we skipped 3, so this was number 4. So you can get some hints in this section. All right, and our last one. What are the natural boundaries of Mesopotamia? Why do we call the land Mesopotamia? All right, so for that, we're going to read this last box here. Natural boundaries. The Tigris and Euphrates are natural boundaries that were formed by nature instead of being drawn by people. So instead of humans deciding, all right, this is the line where the US is and this is where Canada is, right? That's what humans did. We decided there's all this land here. Let's draw this line. This will be your country. This is our country. Natural boundaries mean that they're formed by nature. So this was a boundary because the river, nature, right? The river separates this area of land from this area of land. So that's why it's called a natural boundary. Examples of natural boundaries include rivers, mountain ranges, or deserts. Straight lines on a map generally signify borders made by people, while natural borders can follow many different paths based on what kind of landform it is, based on whether it's a river or a mountain or a desert. This is easy to demonstrate on a map of the United States. Most of the boundaries of the western states are straight lines, like Colorado and Wyoming are rectangles. Many eastern states have jagged shapes because their borders are formed by rivers or mountains. Okay? So, what are the natural boundaries of Mesopotamia? Here's Mesopotamia in here. So what are the boundaries of it? These rivers, right? These 2 rivers separate this chunk of this Mesopotamia area from the rest of the Fertile Crescent. So this question is 2 parts. So for the first part, you're going to say the natural boundaries of Mesopotamia are, and then you're going to put your answer. Then you're going to say, answer why we call the land Mesopotamia. That we went over earlier. The Greeks called this area Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers. So, they called Mesopotamia after the natural boundaries of the rivers. It means between the rivers, which are the natural boundaries. Okay, so we call this land, call the land Mesopotamia. Because, and again, you're going to find that right in here. So remember, it's between these rivers. Okay? You're going to use that stuff. All right, so that is your Fertile Crescent homework. I hope this helped. And remember, if you have any other questions, feel free to talk to me about them before or after class. Good luck.